Today I continue with Ezekiel. Yesterday I went through a graph that showed how all of the prophets fell together. They didn't just go one after another. They actually were in, they were happening in different places at different times. Jeremiah was alive during the time of Daniel and Ezekiel. Ezekiel was alive during the time of Daniel. I think that, Jeremiah died right after the fall of Jerusalem, but we had Daniel went through the next 70 years. And I'm not sure when Ezekiel died or where. I didn't go really with history. I was looking at just what the Word of God said. So here we're having in Ezekiel, and Ezekiel is in the 5th year of the captivity of King Jehoiachin, who had gone to Babylon, and he was a captive for 37 years. So in the 5th year of his captivity, this is when God came to Ezekiel and showed him the creatures that moved back and forth, that had had the different faces. It didn't say they had different heads. It said they had different faces. That had the hands under their wings, that had calves' feet, that moved forward and backwards. The great gigantic wheel that moved with them, and of course the throne that was above it all, where there was a man. He was in amber from the waist up. He was in fire from down. And there was a voice speaking, thundering from firmament. We found that that's God. And in chapter 2, he talks to him and he tells him to stand on your feet. So obviously, Ezekiel's been laid out by this. And who wouldn't be? He calls him up and he puts him up on his feet. I'm going to send you to the children of Israel, but they are a rebellious nation. Now remember, Jerusalem has not fallen. The prophets in Jerusalem had been saying, hey, if these captives go in, well, God's going to rescue them, and he's going to, through the power, go up and bring them back down. So they're still probably believing that lie, believing the lying prophets. Here they are in Babylon thinking, well, we're only going to be here for a short season. God's going to come and send the Israelites to bring us back down. Well, that's not the case. That's what the prophets were saying, and that was a lie. So they're still being rebellious. They're still not knowing that Jerusalem will fall, although God has predicted it and he's going to do it. It hasn't happened yet. The fall of Jerusalem really doesn't happen to about chapter 8. And then chapter 8 on goes with the fall of Jerusalem. And after that, things that we start talking. The last 8 chapters are about this temple which Messiah is going to build, because it's never been built yet. So the temple that has been built, that was there in the time of Jesus, was made by Herod. It wasn't made by a king. I mean, not a king in the lineage of David. Herod was a puppet king that was installed by Rome. He was an Edomite. He was not of Israel. He was a very bad man also. But he sets him up and says, I'm going to send you to an impotent children, and they're stiff-hearted, and I'm going to send you unto them. And maybe they'll hear, maybe they won't. And I'm paraphrasing some of this. He says, they will hear, or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house, yet shall know that I've sent a prophet among them. He just wants them to know, hey, if you're going to hear or not hear, at least I sent a prophet. And son of man, don't be afraid of them, nor afraid of their words, though briars and thorns be with thee, and thou dost dwell with scorpions. Be not afraid of their words, and don't be dismayed at their looks. And again, it's just words and looks. Sometimes we Christians get all wrapped up when people get all sour with us. It's just words and looks. But be thou, son of man, hear what I say to you. Don't be rebellious like these people. Open your mouth and eat this. So he gives him this roll. And he looked, and behold, there was a roll like a little book. And he spread it out, and it was writing on it. It was laments and woes. These are the things that are going to happen. Very sad stuff. Not the happy stuff of we will be redeemed and brought back down by, God through the power of Israel. No, it'll be them coming back after the 70 years are up. Moreover, he said unto me, eat this roll. And he ate it, and he said it was sweet it was like honey in its sweetness. Now, son of man, I'm going to send you into Israel and speak these words. For thou art not sent to a people of a strange language or hard language. This is the language of Israel. This is the people of Israel. So this is not going to be difficult for them to understand, but it will be difficult for them to accept. They don't have hard speech. But the house of Israel will not hearken unto you, for they will not hearken unto me. Now, that's an interesting thing. They won't hearken to you because they're not hearkening to me, but I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep pleading with them. I'm going to keep working with them. Behold, I will make thy face strong against their faces, and your forehead strong against theirs, and an adamant heart, harder than flint, have I made thy forehead. So you're going to be like flint. You're going to set yourself up, and you're going to be focused on what you're doing. Son of man, all these things I have speak unto you, receive in your heart, and go to them into captivity, and speak these words unto them, that they may hear and they may forbear. Then the Spirit took me up, and I heard behind a voice the rushing, saying, Blessed be the glory of the Lord from his place. And he heard the sound of wings, and the creatures touched one another, and against the noise of the wheel, and there was a lot of rushing. So the Spirit left me up and took me away, and he went in bitterness. I mean, the idea of, we think, again, he doesn't know exactly what's going to happen. He's sitting there. He's been taken up with the captives. The lying prophets are giving their story, but Jeremiah has said something else. And I think Ezekiel would have had to have heard Jeremiah. He had to have been old enough. I mean, he had been there, and so he was taken away captives, and he would have been a younger man and would have been alive when Jeremiah was telling them what was going to happen. And so I've set thee up as a watchman. This is that important statement that we take out of context. Setting you up as a watchman on the wall. But he does want his people to know. He wants their rejection to be not because he didn't tell them. And here's a watchman giving Ezekiel the responsibility. He's got the responsibility to tell them. And he says, I set thee as a watchman, and hear the words of your mouth, and give them warning. And if I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, and that you give him not warning, nor speak the way to warn the wicked from his wicked ways to save his life, the same wicked shall die, but shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will be on your hands. Yes, he's going to die in his sins because he didn't listen, but you didn't warn them. Our job as Christians is to just warn. Other people may want to listen, some won't, but our job is to warn them. Our job is the warners. And if you warn the wicked and he turn not from his wickedness, nor from the wickedness that you warn him, then he'll die in his iniquity, but you've delivered your soul. And if a righteous man turn away from his righteousness and commit iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block, I'm going to trip him up so he can come back. And he die in his sin, his righteousness won't be remembered against him, and his blood will be required at your hand. If you don't warn the righteous brother who's tripping up, then his blood will be at your hand. Now, this is what he's telling Ezekiel, and we take this out of context for Christianity. Be very careful. I don't think we've all been made watchmen. If you study, when we get to it about the body of Christ and how there are different placings and there's different giftings, all of it's about warning, but specifically some of us have been giving other gifts than others. So, we're not all watchmen in the same thing. To take this out of context is to take, the promises made to David that you're going to be a king, or the promises that was made to Abraham that your seed will be like the sand of the sea or stars of the sky. We need to be careful about taking things out of context, because we bind ourselves. What you bind on earth, you bind in heaven. What you loose on earth, you loose with heaven. When we make vows that we're the watchman, we don't realize what we're saying before God. Because do you want the responsibility of a watchman? Do you want what goes with it? You won't lose your salvation, but you'll certainly have a problem if you claim to be a watchman, then you don't become a watchman. You have to know that that's something God wants you to do. Taking some of these for every Christian, we take these out of context a lot that way. I've shown that in several places. And he says, arise and goes to the plains, and he goes over, and he went forth, and the glory of the Lord stood there by the river. And the Spirit entered into me and set me on my feet. Go shut yourself up in the house. Now he's told to go and speak to them, but the first place is he's sequestered to the house. And behold, they'll put bands upon you, and they'll bind you with them, and you won't be able to go out. And I'm going to make your tongue cleave to the roof of your mouth, and you'll be dumb. In other words, when they know what you're doing and they start binding you, I'm going to make it to where they can't hear the word. If they start binding you from it, then I'm going to make sure they can't hear, and then their blood will be on their hands. Many times God has said, I will not forgive some people because they're so hardened in heart. So going on to chapter 4, he uses a lot of object lessons. Like he did in the past with Jeremiah. He's doing some object lessons. He says, take a tile and set it down and set it up. And he's doing a little mock type of Jerusalem with a siege happening to it. And he goes and take this iron pan and set it up as a wall between you and thee. And he's using this as an object lesson. Again, they think everything's going to be fine in Jerusalem. They think somebody's going to come and rescue them and take them back home. And that's not how it's going to be. So he's setting his face against them. And he's making a proclamation of certain days. And these days have to do with them, of them being separated from God. So even though they're 70 years out of the land, many people believe that here they're talking about how the diaspora will go on for longer, how they'll be separated from God longer. They're still going to be in captivity. They're not going to be a nation. They're not going to have a king. They're always going to have someone over them like a governor going back and forth. And that's true. Where were they when Christ came? They had the Romans over them. Before them were the Greeks, and before them were, we had these other groups. We had Babylon over them. Then the Medo-Persians were over them. So they always had overseers. They never were really a free nation. But he talks about that. So he's going to talk about, you're going to lay here, and then according to the number of days you'll lie there, you're going to bear their iniquity. So again, their iniquity is going to be put off. They're not going to come back as a nation. That's what many people believe. And I kind of believe it too, because it's not this one man bearing the iniquity, but he's showing that this time of iniquity will go on. And he says, for I have laid upon thee the years of the iniquity according to the number of days, 390 days. Show thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. So he laid there, for 390 days, which has been over a year, to show that they're going to be in their iniquity. And then when that's accomplished, lie down on your right side and bear the iniquity 40 days, which is 40 more years. So that's, 430 years. Many people think that this is 430 years from the time of coming back to the time of Christ, that he's talking about that time period. But again, and then they rejected their Messiah. So God is saying that your iniquity is going to last longer than this. These days will become years. So that's what we're talking here. And he's going to, therefore, set your face towards the siege of Jerusalem and your arms out covered and prophesy against it. Here you are talking with your hands out. Now, I don't think he laid there all day, but every night, it seems like it would be that he would lay against it on one side or lay against it on the other. And maybe there was a fire around there and people could see that he was laying facing, and then he was laying away. It's an object lesson for these people to see. There were other object lessons that come up. There's one of them where he goes and digs a hole in the wall and goes through it and crawls away. And this is how you're going to do. This is how they're going to do in Jerusalem. They're not going to come triumphant. They're going to dig a hole and crawl away. And he does things. God has them do object lessons. He's doing this object lesson. And so, behold, I lay bands upon thee, and you will not turn thee from one side to another until the days are complete of the siege. So he was bound. Still had to go to the bathroom, still had to eat, But here he would lay there and be bound, and then come back and be bound. So I'm going to interpret it like that they saw him being bound, laying there. And there's some object lessons, here that God has used in the past. And so, thou shalt take thee, and the next one's kind of gross. He wants him to take something that has wheat and barley and mullet and lentils and go make it anything that you make bread. According to the number of days that you'll be lying on your side, 390 days. So this is what you're going to eat for 390 days. You're going to make this bread to eat. And you'll also drink water by measure, 1/6 of a hin. So you're going to get food and water while you're laying there. You're all bound, and this is what's going to happen, and the food and water is what's going to happen. You're going to drink the water by measure, and you're going to eat the barley cakes, but first, he says he was going to make those barley cakes, and first he said, and he was going to put some dung in it. That's what's going to happen. is this symbolism of what's going to happen in Jerusalem. They're not going to come just victorious. They're going to run out of food, they're going to run out of water, and then some of them are going to be eating waste, and some of them even one another. It's going to get horrible, and he's trying to set this up so the people will know. So he goes, you'll eat this barley cake when dung comes out of a man. And because what's happening in Jerusalem, it defiles them, so they're being defiled. And he goes, oh, Lord, I haven't been polluted from my years up. So he talks them out of using man's dung, but they put in a little bit of cow dung. Now, it might not have been a whole handful, but just enough sprinkled in there and mixed in with everything, and everybody knew it was there. This is part of the object lesson. He's making it. And lo, I have given thee cow dung for man's dung. Moreover, he said, I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem, and they that eat bread by weight shall take care that they drink water by measure, and will be astonished, that they may want bread and water, and be astonished one to another, and continue and consume away from the iniquity. So he's talking about here what's going to happen is that this is an object lesson for what's going to happen to Jerusalem. So we see this going on. He continues with another object lesson in chapter 5. 5, 6, and 7 are their own idea. And remember in other times where I've said that we go from idea to idea. Well, technically speaking, this idea goes from chapter 2 through chapter 7. I don't have enough time to go through that. But I'll go through the object lessons here. So we're dealing with that Ezekiel's been called. He's been told that they're not going to listen, but God's going to send him anyway. This is not predestination. This is a bit of foreknowledge, but it's also knowing just in front of you, you've got people of hardened hearts. It doesn't take a scientist to figure that out. But he goes and has them go anyway. And he tells them what his orders are to be this watchman, to warn the wicked and the righteous men who choose to do wicked, so that their blood would not be on his hands. But then he has them quiet for a while, because if they're not going to listen, then he shuts off the message. And then we do this object lessons. If they're not going to hear, they're going to see. So we're going to move on with object lessons tomorrow. But God is trying to call them back. This is a form of pleading. And again, Jerusalem hasn't fallen yet. We're still trying to get it in that God will not be mocked. Sin has its consequences, and God's going to go against Jerusalem. He's trying to just tell them, but they won't listen. Thank you.